my book babes, it's Courtney. Welcome back to my channel. Now, as many of you know, I've been feeling quite sick. I don't know what that bug was over the last week, but I'm definitely feeling a whole lot better. So I thank you for all the well wishes that people have been sending me. I have my tea here, got a little bit of congestion, but definitely feeling better. Now, as you know, I have been participating in July in 3 readathons, so let's wrap this bad boy up, okay? So the first readathon was journey-a-thon. I posted that video already. I'm going to link it below. Middle grade readathon. It was a whole bunch of fun. The next readathon was lazy summer evenings readathon, hosted by my Cozy Chronicles, and that was a whole bunch of fun as well. I posted that video last week. I will link it below. So that leaves F-athon by Chronicles of Noria. Now, this is the readathon that is talking about the establishment. We want things to be right. So we are reading books that are trumping the establishment in negativity. So 3 prompts there. Now, I will say that there was a group read, The 7 Necessary Sins of Girls and Women, and I did not get to that due to sickness. But that's okay. I'm going to table that for Nonfiction November because I definitely want to read that book. So the first prompt was F transphobia, and I read The Trauma Cleaner, which I spoke about this in the Lazy Summer Evenings readathon. But this is basically a nonfiction biography of a trans woman who was a father, who lived a very interesting life, culminating in being a cleaner for hoarded houses and for crime scenes. Very interesting book, I will say. I will say that I was not a fan of the fact that I don't feel like there's a lot of personal growth when it comes to the emotions of the character. Her name is Sandra in here, but this was definitely a very good book, worth checking out. Much appreciated reading it. The next book is There. Now, this book is for excuse me, F-cellular colonialism. Now, this person, Tommy Orange, is part of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes of Oklahoma, and he was born and raised in Oakland, California. Now, basically, Tommy Orange in There explores Native American culture and history through the lives of 12 interconnected urban Native Americans who plan to attend this big Oakland powwow. Now, urban refers to Native Americans that are born in the city. Now, there are essays about the stealing of Native American lands, genocides of the people, loss and attempts to preserve the culture, and also continued oppression of Native Americans. Now, as an African American, I did feel there was a great correlation in the sentiments expressed by many of the natives in this book regarding culture that has been lost or stolen. I can't think of better words, I will say, than what has been expressed in this book. Just very good. Now, in page 138, I wrote that down. There's a quote. It said, "If you are fortunate enough to be born into a family whose ancestors directly benefited from genocide and our slavery, maybe you think the more you don't know, the more innocent you can stay, which is a good incentive to not find out, to not look too deep, to walk carefully around the sleeping tiger. Look no further than your last name. Follow it back and you may find your line paved with gold or beset with traps." Very poignant. Now, I hear a whole lot about people saying don't dwell on history, but I will say that generational trauma is real. It is inherited, and I think it bleeds true for everyone, white, black, whoever. So some people can get away with it and not worrying about histories. Others, I think it shows on your skin and follows you everywhere you go and in how people address you. So unless you're part of a history where you feel like you're chasing it, then I think people shouldn't judge others that have an issue with getting over past trauma. And the next book I read, now this book is pretty interesting. Now this book is for F. basically misogyny. Now this is the three mothers, which is how the mothers of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and James Baldwin shaped a nation. Now this book I actually heard about through channel Lex Reads, and I also think Library Without Borders also spoke about this as well. Now you have the mothers of these three gentlemen. You have Alberta, you have Bertus, and you have Luis. The book talks about the erasure of black women's voices by black men and by whites, and about how these women taught resistance through voting, through education, through land ownership. And this book basically talks about motherhood, specifically black motherhood, and how black women have been dehumanized, is seen as immoral and sexual human beings pretty much from the start of black people being recognized. Now this book was really amazing in that it showed you these strong women behind these strong men, and that's a perspective that you don't really get to see. You get to see how much education influenced these women and how they imparted that on their sons, and how they taught them to be proud of themselves and to have a lot of self-worth. So this book kind of followed their lives. Actually, it starts from their parents as well, starting around the end of the 19th century. These women actually had a whole lot in common in being raised in supportive families. Now, not only does this book talk about their individual lives, which I thought was really neat, but it is definitely a history lesson. And I wrote a few things down. Pretty much, this is given the history lesson, of course, of things that are not taught in school. Author definitely did her homework, but it talks about how there were so many excuses to target black people, especially those trying to advocate for themselves and for education for black people as a whole. It talked a lot about the atrocities and the violence that black faced in the United States. Just utterly horrific stuff. It talked about women's suffrage and how that did not include black women. I think that's a common misconception for people that don't dig into the women's suffrage movement. It talks about how black men served in World War I, but when they come back, they were greater targets for whites because they had pride about themselves and they had money, and that was something that people at the time did not want to see from black people. It also spoke about how the North was not much better than the South. You had the whole Great Migration from 1910 to 1970s of black people from the South up to the North thinking that they were getting into better circumstances, and it really was not. It also spoke about how women were not allowed to hold jobs after they were married up until 1964 with the Civil Rights Act. That's definitely something I had no idea about. Apparently there was racial clauses for home ownership. I did hear a lot about that. A lot of people really don't talk about that in history as well. And it also talks about how birth control was geared to control African American birth rates, because during slavery times, black people were basically commodities and property. So the more that they procreated, the more that the white landowners' richness was. However, once slavery was no longer a thing, then African Americans procreating was now a potential threat to whites of being overtaken as the majority. So also part of that was a lot of forced sterilizations as well. Just truly heartbreaking. And another thing that this book talked about is the stigma behind mental illness, which is something that still goes on today. I will say that in the end of this book, it does get political. It talks about recording black female stories so that they can be widely known, but it also talks about supporting black women instead of reducing black women into a stereotype and making life a lot more difficult for them. This is definitely the type of book that you want to have on your shelf and annotate, because it just has so much poignant stuff inside of it. And that is it for July. It has been quite a month, okay? So let me know if you've read any of these books, and let me know what you thought of them, okay? So please like, subscribe, and comment, and I will see you in August. Bye, y'all.